Right, now preparing the shutter for attachment to the body. One thing I should have realised earlier was that we need to put the focus screen back in place. That's because it can't be removed once the shutter's in the camera body. It's an unusual design, that's just the way it is. Not sure why they chose to do it like that. Now looking at this tray, you'll see that the back edge, one edge, the back in this case, is slightly tipped up. That's so you can put the adjustment rods in there, because the height of the screen is adjusted by inserting effectively a needle underneath the screen to lift it up to the right position. And they came in different thicknesses. So it's important that the little notch is lifted up at the back edge, otherwise you won't be able to get the wire in easily. Let's get this screen dropped down into place. And it's held in place with this spring arrangement. So there's two little holes at one end and screw holes in the top of the casting here. Let's see if I can get this in. Alright, so that's sitting in place. Now I have to hold down that spring. It's got quite some tension to it. And there are two small flathead screws that hold that in position. Right, once you've got one in, you're a little bit safer. The spring is quite strong. It will try to project those screws away across the workshop if you give it half a chance. Okay, so I've got that in place. Now obviously the screen, I cleaned that before I put that in there, and I just cleaned that with some cotton buds, Q-tips, and some ordinary domestic glass cleaner. Nothing fancy. So the screen's easy, flat side down, convex side up, and the back edge, the side trays of that thing, the back edge is tipped up because we're going to be inserting the adjustment pins in there. In this case, I have the correct ones and I can slide them in now. But this could be done when this is already back in the camera. Here's our camera body. We need to prepare this now for getting the shutter in place. You can see I've got the film advance lever on the top, but I haven't got its return spring there, it's just sitting there. Now the secret with this is getting our shutter back in here. There's various things you've got to achieve all at the same time. This flappy piece here has to come up through that slot in the casting. The mirror and the capping plate have to come in below the focus screen. And that's about all the complications you've got, but they're more than enough to get you in trouble. So we need some way, obviously we can't push down the capping plate and that from the top because the screen's going to be above it. We need some way of holding this down out of the way. And what's been suggested is a catch, something like this. This is just made up out of a paper clip. And it's just inserted through here, holds the mirror down, and it hooks over the body through there. So it's holding the mirror down out of the way, and the capping plate too, of course. Now, see if we can do this without it being a major fight. I'm going to feed this thing up through that slot in the casting. I hope that wasn't my mirror coming back up. No, it wasn't. We're okay. Get this wriggled into place. That's just seated. Now at this stage you'll be tempted to try the film advance and see if it cocks the shutter. Don't do that, because we've got our capping plate and mirror held down with our clip, and that will not enjoy it if you tried doing that. Okay, so let's try it now. I'm holding the front of the camera on snugly. You'll see as I move the film advance, shutter cocks, is in the open position. As I release the shutter, it all works. So everything's looking pretty good there, about as good as you could hope for. We've got 6 screws that hold this front in place, and it's very easy to drop these things down into the casting while you're trying to get them in position. You can ask me how I know that. So I'll get my 6 screws started. Of course that one's under that plastic insulator. I noticed that there's a number engraved in the casting here and in here. So the front plate and the casting were matched together in some fashion. They were intended to be together. Now what that number is, in this case it's 9735. I don't know whether that means it was the 9735th camera to float down this assembly line, or if that's got some other meaning. But it certainly is intended that this front plate and this casting stay together. Alright, so the front is on the camera. We can test the shutter. That's all looking pretty good. Now the shutter, the aperture ring is coupled to the meter setting knob on this camera, which would fit here. So as I turn this, you can see that the aperture settings would move, and in this case they move nice and smoothly. For a terrible, rotten, rusty piece of rubbish, this camera's turning out okay. Right, the next, what have we got next? We can close up some of this body stuff. Now we've got 2 panels at the front here. These are particularly nasty looking. So I'll take the opportunity to clean these up a little bit with some naphtha. Honestly, this is pretty rusty, so it's not going to be a thing of beauty once it's done. I'll just clean these up with a bit of naphtha and then we screw them back to the body. Before I put the front panels on, I'm going to put the base back on here. This chrome panel. It's certainly no thing of beauty. Now you might remember this was held in with 4 flathead screws. They were much like the ones that held the front cover on, except they were longer. So those front trims will be held on with 6 flathead screws like this, except just they're the shorter ones. You'll probably only have 1 camera out on the bench in little pieces, and therefore you only have the pieces from 1 camera on the bench. Unfortunately for me, I've got the mortal remains of about 3 cameras here And so, counting how many screws I've got, where they came from and where they might go back to, is a bit tricky. But I do have a video to refer back to. Okay, so that's good. Let's get these front pieces on. You've got to make sure it passes in underneath that little tab there. That's for setting the flash sync self-timer. If you don't watch out for that, you'll end up with this thing jammed over the top and wonder why you can't get anything to work. Now there are 3 flathead screws either side of the front here. That is not one of them. That is a chrome screw from the top cover. But I can forgive myself for mistaking that, because everything here is evenly ugly. Easy. Now this side, I've got to solder back my flash connection here before I put that in place. I'll go away and do that back very shortly. Right, that's soldered back into position. See if I can get this cover plate in. Reluctant. It's not wanting to go. That's almost it. That screw hole at the top is fine. That one there is okay. This one's slightly off. This needs to come in more at this point. I might have to use some brutal techniques to deal with that. Well, you can learn from the error of my ways. I had too big a blob of solder on the back of that connection. It wasn't allowing it to sit down. And that's why this wouldn't slide into place. Okay, so the front's looking somewhat complete. I've even got a lens here. I can show you what it looks like with the lens attached. Yeah, it almost looks like a camera. and we have a shutter that works. There's still a few more things need to go on happening here. Now there's a control lever that goes on here, and that's to prevent you losing. It's a blank exposure prevention lever, they call it, and it's to stop you being able to depress the shutter release, I think, when it's hasn't been cocked, which would release the film advance and allow you to move on again. Okay, so let's get that on. Now that is this piece here. It has a shoulder screw that goes through there at the pivot, and this post here has a spring on it, and the post itself acts as the guide for this piece here. And this piece here is very important. So really the easiest way to get this together is to get that screw started first through there, and then put the pivot screw in place. Now, really you want the camera in a vertical position in order to achieve this. So I'll see if I can block this up with something here, so it doesn't fall over while I'm fighting with it. And let's see if we can get that screw in place. As the expression goes, this is not my first rodeo, and I know exactly how awkward it is to get this screw in. Really, I want a very long, thin screwdriver to get down to it, but of course I have none. Ooh. I have the screw started. If I can avoid mutilating that spring, all will be well with the world. Alright, I can do without that jig now. I can get in from the side, I think. That's good. Now if I can get this lever in, and its pivot point screw will be right. I'll get it in and then I'll explain where it sits and why. Get that screw just started. Now this lever, with the spring, let's see if I can get this thing to focus a bit better. I'm having fun with this thing. That'll do nicely. So this lever that we're just, pivoting lever we're just trying to get on here, needs to sit on top of this thing. At the moment it's sitting behind it or underneath it. That's better. Now it's sitting correctly. Well, of course it popped instantly out of place as soon as I started doing the screw up. Well, it would do. Okay, so if we release the shutter, let's cock the shutter, this pin comes up and locks the film advance so you can't move it. When you release the shutter, this arm comes up, presses this thing up, pulls this end down, disengaging it from the film advance, and you can release the shutter again. I'm just checking that I've got everything there that should be there. It all looks good. So what do we want on the top of our camera from here? There's our shutter release button. Makes life much easier. I want to put a little bit of lubrication on this shaft here. This is our rewind shaft. There's a little bit of rubbish still about the camera. You know, there was that little piece of plastic that was wedged in to the film advance. It's that sort of stuff. And I found out what that was. There's a little window in the back of the top cover which allows you to view your frame lines. Now this is glued on with some clear lacquer type adhesive, and they were very generous with it, and over time it's just gone hard and useless, and that's what fell off, a lump of that hard and useless adhesive. So I'll clean this up a bit, put some lubrication on there, and I'm just going to put a little drop of oil in there, a bit of 3-in-1 to tell the truth, just to make sure that's moving smoothly, because I don't want to take it all apart and play with it. Then clean the prism and put that in place. And there's not much more after that. Now I've popped the top cover back on here. I put the prism in place, put a little piece of foam underneath the top cover. That's all that holds that prism down in place, and put 2 screws in the top to keep it there. Now the reason I've done this at the moment is so that I can put those 2 pieces of those fine needles or pins that were the spacers that go underneath the edge of the screen there. I can put them in place now, and I'll show you how this can be done from the back of the camera. There are 2 little holes in the body, here and here. Now they will be covered with little plastic covers, and they could be plastic, they could be card, they could be anything. All they are is just to blank off those holes. But that gives you access to that focus screen, and by pushing those needles in underneath that screen, I will lift that up to the height that it was originally, and it's extremely likely that that will be the correct height for this camera, and that the focus in the finder will, as a result, will also be correct. At the moment it's not quite. It's pretty close, but it's not quite. I've already checked the focus at the film plane, and that's good, so I know it's just my prism. Now alternatively, with different SLR cameras, some will adjust the focus in the prism assembly, the screen rather, by moving the screen up or down relative to the mirror, and in other cases you'll do it by shifting the mirror so that the mirror stops changes and effectively changes the distance between the mirror and the prism. In this case, we do it by adjusting the position of the focus screen, and it's set with nothing in here at the moment, no spaces at all, which means the focus screen is down lower to the prism, lower to the mirror than it otherwise would be. And I need my 2 fine needles, and then they go in the holes at the back there, and if you look down in there, and I can't show you because it's too hard to see, there are just two, it's possible, there are just 2 little areas that you can slide that pin down into. And what I suggest is if you had multiple cameras on the bench and you had bits and pieces from multiple cameras and you were swapping things backwards and forwards, for example, then these spaces might not be correct for your camera because you might have swapped the focus screen in from a different camera, for example. In this case, I'm pretty confident these will be okay because this is where they came from. And so I'll just need to get my tweezers and feed these spaces into place. Now I know one side here is easier than the other because one side's got a more pronounced gap underneath it. That's started. Some of these pins might be tapered, so they're easy to get in position. Others may not be. It's just luck of the draw what you'll find. That looks right. Now I'm not pushing them back down home yet. I'm leaving some sticking out so that I can grab them with my tweezers and pull them out. If I decide that that's not really the correct size for this camera and I should be trying something different. Now I'm just going to view out the window at my infinity target and see how the image looks there. I'm very happy with the state of that, so I can just press those little wires home and put a little bit of lacquer around the edge of this and drop these 2 spaces in to cover those ports. And that would be that job done. So now I know I'm happy with the position of my focus screen. I know that it's giving me apparently correct focus in the finder at the infinity position, and I've already checked with a ground glass screen at the film plane that the lens is giving me correct focus at the back too. So we can put the meter back in this camera. You can see the foam that I've got glued on the inside of that. Let's take that prism out for the moment. Our meter goes back in here. And effectively what we've got to do is not very much really, this just sits in here. So here's our meter. It's held in with 3 screws. Now the only coupling of this to the camera really is at the top, to the control knobs. But we have to arrange our control knobs so that they match up with the aperture and so forth here. But this is all we need in here in the camera, is to put our meter back in there, and that's held in place with 3 screws. And if I'm very lucky, I'll be able to find them straight away. And we'll be in business. Oh yeah, we look at that. If you've been very cautious taking your camera apart, taking note of where everything came from and what screws did what job, you'll have no problem finding the right screws for the right job. If you're a messy worker like me, you might have all the screws thrown into a big box, and every time you need to do something like put things back together, you have a puzzle. Alright, that's looking good. That's my prism. Top cover. Make sure you have your viewfinder lens clear and clean. This is the time to do it. And our frame counter window has to go back in the body here. Of course, here's our frame counter window, and you can see that yellowish rubbish. That's the adhesive that was holding the thing back previously. The stuff that had given way and was causing us problems. I can see that there's a little bit of adhesive has come round onto the face of that window right there. I'll get rid of that. That was just sitting loose. That just tells me the adhesive was no good, because I know it didn't even stick to the plastic. Whatever they'd used did a lousy job. Alright, so I'm going to clean this window, being very careful not to take off the white painted stripe, the indices there, because otherwise you won't like it. Alright, I'll clean this, glue it back in the top cover, and my video camera is telling me the battery's flat.